What is going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. This is the channel where we sit down and cover different comic book stories from Marvel, DC, and any other comic book company out there. But today, we are going to jump back over to Marvel Comics and continue our coverage over Daredevil. Now, we are covering the latest Daredevil series, and we're going to pick up with Volume 2 that covers Daredevil number 6 all the way up to number 10. Now, in this volume right here, we're going to see what has Daredevil been up to ever since he quit being a hero, but also we learned that Kingpin has a new big plan for New York, but not just New York City, but the state of New York. So if you do like today's comic book video, please hit that like button down below and also subscribe to the channel for more content to come in the near future. But I do hope you enjoy. So the story begins with these two shop owners getting ready to open their business up for the day. We see the wife is complaining about opening so early, except after she finishes complaining, she sees some thugs outside the shop of a different owner. That is when the husband tells his wife that he had to give money to the party shop owner because he was going to be short on the money he was supposed to give over to the owl. It is the classic thing game groups do to shop owners. They have to pay money for some kind of protection. Remember that the owl is this mutant who is based on the animal of the owl, who is one of the gang leaders who work for the Kingpin. Now, picking up with the main character of the book, which is Matt Murdock himself, we pick up months later after he had quit being Daredevil. Right now, he's just living life and he is actually enjoying the fact that he had put the Daredevil persona away and just focuses on being Matt Murdock, where we see him going around the city and talking to people he has grown to know in the last few months. We see him just walking to his new job. Now, before we can learn what Matt Murdock's new job is, we actually pick up with Cold North. Now, Cold North was brought here from Chicago to New York to handle the vigilante situation in the city. His main goal was Daredevil, but he had failed to capture Daredevil, and now Daredevil has not been seen for some time. And so with him not being able to bring in Daredevil or any other vigilante at all, his boss is kind of upset with him not being able to do his job, stating that he better turn things around soon or he could be sent back to Chicago. But then we pick up with Wilson Fisk, another important character in Daredevil comics. But we see him right now kind of training by fighting against people that he hired to fight him. Except there is a point where you have Kingpin begin to choke the life out of someone. But we can see something is going on in the mind of Kingpin that basically when he sees the man that he is choking out, he actually sees Daredevil instead. But luckily Kingpin assistant comes in and is able to snap Kingpin out of it. Now we do get introduced to Mindy Libris, and we meet her through Matt Murdock going to a random bookstore. We see that with his radar powers that he finds Mindy somewhat interesting and attractive, but does not make a move or anything, except he came to this bookstore to actually buy a book for a close friend of his. But while he is talking to Mindy, you can see that Matt is finding her attractive and hoping this will lead to something in the future. Even though she says that she has a husband, she also remembers Matt because he was mayor for a hot second in the last Daredevil series. Finally, we get to learn what Matt Murdock's new job is, which is that now he is a parole officer. Honestly, kind of interesting to see him being a parole officer now, but you can see that he is enjoying the fact of being one. It is him doing what he always loved to do, which is him helping people, where you have Matt show off his ability to detect when someone is lying to him to the new person he was assigned to. Now, while we watch Matt Murdock being a parole officer and meeting with the newest person he was assigned to work with, we actually see Cole North on some of the pages, and he is going into the park. Now, the reason why Cole North went into the park is because while he was walking in the middle of the night, he figured out that he was being followed, but being followed by some of his fellow cops. Except these cops are actually dirty cops because these cops were hired by the Kingpin to keep an eye out on Daredevil. But with him gone now, they're not getting paid. They blame Cole North for that. And so their goal is to beat up on Cole North for Daredevil leaving. And of course they do corner him and begin to beat up on him. But he is saved by some thugs who work for the Owl. See, the Owl is now protecting Cole North because the Owl thinks that thanks to Cole North is the one who got rid of Daredevil. And since the Owl and Daredevil were enemies, this is kind of the Owl thanking Cole North for getting rid of Daredevil. But before the first chapter ends, we pick up with the wife of the pair shop owners we saw earlier as she goes over to the party shop owner's shop for some balloons. Now, while she is shopping, she hears some thugs coming into the party shop owner's shop and begin to beat up on the man for being short on his payment. Except while this wife is hiding somewhere in the shop, she sees a Daredevil outfit. And we can see in her eyes that she is inspired to step up to protect people like Daredevil used to. Now, picking up the next day, we see the leaders of each gang member going to a random bank. Well, they actually go to the safe room of this bank. The reason why is because the Kingpin had called a meeting and he owns this bank. And so he closes the safe to actually have a meeting with these gang members. Now, these gang members are confused on why the meeting was called for because to them, they have been doing their job. Except like in a crime empire, you do have some problems between some of the members of the gang, especially between the Owl and another leader named Izzy. And we're going to see Izzy later on in this book. But Izzy is the one to show Kingpin and the other leaders that Daredevil has been seen in Hell's Kitchen, which gains Kingpin's attention. But before we can see what Kingpin will do with the fact that Daredevil is back, you had a story shift over to Matt Murdock having a meal with his close friend Foggy Nelson. Remember that he went to the bookstore to get a book for a close friend, which of course it was Foggy Nelson. But this is showing that with Matt Murdock no longer being Daredevil, he is able to spend more time with his friends. Also, we see that while talking to Foggy, Matt is thinking about Mindy Libris, the bookshop owner who is married. Now this leads into Matt Murdock going into work. We get to see Matt Murdock is actually being able to build relationships with everybody, like his co-worker Tamara. But we see he's about to talk to the newest person he was assigned to parole over, which is just some kid named Joey. But Joey is going to be important because when Joey starts talking about why he did all the different crimes for, which was to help take care of his mother, but this leads into a conversation about Joey's brother, how he was originally the one taking care of their mother, except he tried to pull a small robbery, but it led to him being killed by Daredevil. Instantly, it is Daredevil knowing who he is talking about. It was the thug that Daredevil killed in our last video. The death that led to Matt Murdock down a path of going insane and being forced to quit. And so it leads to Matt just panicking and actually leaving the room. But then we pick back up with the meeting that the Kingpin called between him and his gang leaders. This is going to be the most important part of this book really. Well, one of them. It is the Kingpin telling them that he is done being the Kingpin, that he is actually going to step away from being a crime lord. Now he tells them that he will make sure that the cops will not interfere with the gang leader's work because he is the mayor, but he is going to split his staff of men evenly between all of the gang leaders. He says that the city is his, but the crime underworld will belong to them. Then he actually leaves, meaning that he is serious about quitting. But we pick up with Matt Murdock meeting up with Sister Elizabeth, and Sister Elizabeth was first seen in our last video. Anytime Matt Murdock needs anyone to talk to, he goes to her, where he tells her that his past sins have come back into his life, and he never truly worked through them. He does not know how to handle it, but he is referring to him killing that thug in our last video, where you have Sister Elizabeth asking Matt, has he ever asked for God's forgiveness? Because it is him thinking that with him killing that thug in our last video, that God won't forgive him, which she tells him God always will. The story gives us the Kingpin again to kind of show us that the Kingpin was actually serious about quitting being the Kingpin of crime. That he is talking to his assistant about how with him being the king of crime, he has gotten bored. And so it is time for him to go for something bigger in life. What that means is what we are going to see later on. This leads into us seeing a pair of ladies walking down the street. But out of nowhere, you have some random bad people appearing and begin to try to steal these ladies' purses. Except out of nowhere, we see a random man wearing a mask of Daredevil. This is showing us that with Daredevil gone, people are trying to fill in the role of Daredevil. Except they are not trained like Daredevil was. And so of course, we see this guy struggling, but with the help with the pair of ladies, he was able to beat these thugs. But to close on the second chapter, we see Daredevil sitting in his room. That instead of becoming Daredevil again, what he is doing instead is that he is calling the police every time he hears something going on in his city. He is trying his best not to put the Daredevil outfit back on, but still help the city out. And when we pick up with Matt Murdock again though, it is the next day and we see him going back to the bookstore once again, where of course he meets Mindy, the married lady again. He said he came here to just thank her, but she can tell that there is something more than that. Which of course it is Matt Murdock just trying to get some fun time with her. But this section ends with Mindy actually asking Matt to dinner, but dinner with her family, meaning her husband, brother-in-law, daughter, mother-in-law, and her husband's grandmother. Matt agrees to the dinner plans. Now we finally learn what the Kingpin big plan is, because we see him meeting up with the governor Todd Kettle. This is Kingpin telling us what he meant when it comes to him reaching for a big goal. That basically his goal is to gain profit from the legalization for marijuana. Except in New York, it has been a battle to get it legalized. But Kingpin tells us that Todd Kettle is trying to buy up farmland in the appearance of a company that is actually buying it, and so that he will get the profit. Except there are some people in his way, and so you have Kingpin decide they work together to get it legalized but get the farmland they need. This is step one of Kingpin trying to become the Kingpin of the state of New York instead of just the city. So you had the story give us the big dinner that Daredevil was invited to, which of course he goes to. When he gets there, he is greeted by Mindy Libris, and when he walks in, he is greeted by her brother-in-law. But when it comes time for Matt to meet Mindy's husband, he sees Tom Libris. That tells him that he is somewhere that he should not be at, because when he gets into the dinner room, he sees Izzy Libris, who we saw earlier, that she is one of the crime bosses that was under Kingpin's leadership. That right now, Matt Murdock is having dinner with one of the crime leaders' families. Quickly, we can see that Matt is now welcome here, that the family knows that Matt was the mayor of the city for a hot second, but also the fact that he was an attorney of law and put a lot of people away, a lot of people who worked under Izzy. But this leads into an argument between Matt Murdock and Izzy Libris, that basically with Matt following the law, he is following a set of laws for a polite society or for high class people. To Matt, the laws were made to give the country equality, except you have Izzy Libris quickly tell him what he thinks is wrong, but in reality, these laws put certain people down and make it hard for them to get out from the bottom level of the social class. Now we do get this story about Izzy Libris' mother, how she was the first to begin the big Libris crime family. The point of this section is that we learn how Izzy Libris' mother had to fight her way to get to where the family has gotten to. But to point out that basically, thanks to her going against the laws that would keep people down from her social class, she was able to rise to the top. Yes, it did lead to stealing, murdering, and other crimes, but look where they're at now. You have Matt Murdock try to counter argue that one day this family will pay, except that is when you have Izzy tell Matt about how the Kingpin had quit being the Kingpin of crime, which of course shocks Matt Murdock. But this leads into someone shooting into the home of the Libris family, where of course you have Matt being able to warn people in advance before the shots went off, except you also have Matt use his abilities to protect the families in different ways, hoping to save their lives. So dinner got cut a little short before anything else could happen between Izzy and Matt. Except this gives us a chance to see Matt Murdock meeting Cole North for the first time as Matt Murdock, where you have Cole North asking questions about Daredevil because Cole North knows that Matt Murdock and Daredevil have close ties. Except you have Cole North tell Matt Murdock that basically there have been people dressing up like Daredevil. That matter of fact, after the shooting and the shooter began to run away, a nearby citizen decided to give chase, except this citizen was wearing a Daredevil mask. Now the citizen was killed and we find out that the shooter works for the Owl, which is the Owl just trying to get rid of Izzy because it will give him her territory, and the Owl kills the shooter. But this is Cole North stating that people are trying to fill in the missing void of the city, which is Daredevil himself. After that, we pick up with Matt Murdock meeting with Reed Richards, and this leads into an interesting conversation between the two characters. The topic is about if there is really a God in this world. For Daredevil, it is something that has been on his mind. If there is one, why is God punishing him? Except for Reed Richards, it is hard for him to believe in God. Because one, he is a man of science. Also to throw out that Reed Richards has seen so many crazy things in the world while being on his adventures that it is hard for him to say that there is a God in this world. Now you have Matt Murdock meeting up with Mindy Libris, the lady who owned the bookstore, but also the lady who invited Matt to have dinner with her crime family. The reason why she invited Matt to dinner was hoping that with Matt there, that maybe it will somehow make her husband leave the crime family so he can focus on her and their daughter. Because he had always thought about leaving the family, but of course he just got deeper into crime activity that basically it is now him fully devoted to help the crime family out. And so you have Matt feel sorry for Mindy because all she wants is her family to leave this life. Once again, you have Matt go back to see Sister Elizabeth once again because he thinks God is sending him signs to be Daredevil again. Except the fact that if he does become Daredevil again, he will be committing crimes and sins to help people. Except the world is not peaceful and his lifelong goal is to make his city peaceful. And so you have Sister Elizabeth tell Matt that she can't tell what signs from God look like because they can appear in different ways. Just have to keep your eyes open. She also tells Matt about a family is worried about their son who has begun hanging around a certain gang. But we pick up with Cole North, who is working in the police department trying to locate Spider-Man, since again, being a vigilante is illegal. But then another cop comes over and tells them that they have someone who could help him with his Spider-Man case. Except when Cole walks into the room, he finds his partner Fred Higgins badly beaten up. And this is where we learn that after Cole North was beaten by those dirty cops in the park but saved by the Owl thugs, but after the incident, you had Cole tell his boss it was a bunch of dirty cops who jumped him. And with him doing that, you have these other dirty cops upset because, thanks to Cole North, their friends have been painted as dirty cops, but also the fact that he has been making it hard for them to make any money because now he is under the Owl's protection. And so they want him to leave. If he doesn't, they will continue to hurt people close to him. Getting back over to Matt Murdock, we see him slowly taking up the mantle as Daredevil. Because remember, there was a family looking for their son who started to hang with a certain gang. And so you have Matt Murdock go to that certain gang hangout and begin the process of beating them up. Now, of course, he has a hard time again, but this time it's because he has not been Daredevil in a long time. And so with him fighting, it is him getting back in the groove again. After he does all that fighting, you have Matt Murdock tell the boy that he needs to go back to his family. After he does that, you have Daredevil actually go and pay a visit to Mindy again. And this is the point where Daredevil is able to complete the one thing he was trying to do in the beginning of this book, which is to have some fun time with Mindy, who is married. She thinks back how Matt was able to save her family members from the shooting, but also kind of being this nicer guy that entered her life. And so it's her saying that she has gained feelings for Matt. In the final chapter, we pick up with Cole North checking up on his friends Fred Higgins in the hospital, letting us know that Fred is literally on life support now. And the question is, what is going to happen next to Fred, since he could die or survive here? We then pick up with Daredevil himself, letting us know that he and Mindy have started sleeping with each other, where it does bother him, but also he is happy with Mindy. Except the scene gets cut off short because he gets a phone call from Tamara, his co-worker, that one of the people he was assigned to be their parole officer was arrested. But getting back over to Frank Cole, we see him go back over to the police department where he is trying to keep his cool, knowing that these dirty cops are no longer playing around. We also see that Matt Murdock is there at the police department to see why the person he was assigned to got arrested, which we find out it was Joey, the brother who Daredevil killed on accident in the last video. Except while talking to Matt Murdock, we see that one of the dirty cops gets a call and is freaking out, which leads to the whole department freaking out. This is where we learn that Mindy bookstore got burned down, because we pick up with her running up to the shop and saw her husband outside of the shop, letting us know that some of the Owl men have burned down the shop. How Mindy's husband tried to save the books but failed. And so you have Mindy show us that she's still in love with her husband by telling him that all that matters is that he is okay. This is where we get the meat and potatoes of this book, that basically with the Owl burning down the bookstore of Mindy, who is married into the Libris family, Mindy's husband told his mother, who is Izzy Libris, who runs the Libris family, that it was some of the Owl's men. Izzy is calling for a clean house, to clean out anyone that has some kind of connection to the Owl, even if it is him just protecting them. which also means that Cold North has to go because it seems that he is under the protection of the Owl. And so you have some of the dirty cops beginning the clean house process with him. Now Matt Murdock hears what is going on and decides to jump in to stop all of this. Now we get a ton of pages to show us Cold North is working hard not to die by the hands of these dirty cops. Also, he is trying to get out of there, but while fighting them, you have Matt Murdock step in his makeshift Daredevil outfit to help Cold North fight against these dirty cops. This is big because in the last video they were enemies, but now they are allies in trying to survive the night. After they work together and beat down all of these dirty cops, Cold North looks at Matt Murdock and Matt's face is covered to keep his identity. But Cold North can tell that this is Daredevil, except Daredevil leaves Cold North there. Finally, to close on this book, we pick up with Matt Murdock realizing that the city is calling out to him again to be Daredevil, except he is greeted by Elektra and her saying that he needs her help. And this is the end of this story. Now, this is part of the video where I sit down and give my thoughts on about the book. And just like volume 1 of Daredevil of this current run, I love volume 2. Now, volume 1 came out full swinging. I mean, it came out full swinging. It was intense, it was beautiful, and I love that story. Volume 2 is not like volume 1. It didn't come out full swinging. It kind of told us we need to come down a tad bit because we need to build up some things for later books. And I like that because even though this book was not as intense as the first one, it still did a good job to keep my attention and say, hey, yes, this book may have less action than the first one, but everything here from issue number 6 all the way up to issue number 10, it is going to be very important. So you must follow along. And truthfully, I love how this volume ended with Elektra coming in because Elektra is very important in Daredevil comics. And so I love what they did with this story right here. And I can't wait to cover volume 3 because I read volume 3 and volume 3 is amazing. But this is where I'm going to end today's video. So please hit that like button down below and also subscribe to the channel for more content to come in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read? Well, please let me know in the comments below because you never know. Your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But I'll see y'all next time. Later.